And we're joined now by CBS News Chief Legal Correspondent Jan Crawford and CBS News Justice and Homeland Security Correspondent Jeff Pegues. Jeff, I want to start with you. Why did Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein have to name a special counsel?
Well, because it was those memos, the Comey memos that popped up that were causing a lot of controversy. And then this idea that Comey was fired, and why was he fired? Was it the Russia investigation or was it the recommendation of Rosenstein? And so you had all of this bubbling up to the surface. It came to the point where he had no choice but to appoint Bob Mueller.
And Jan, what's the scope of what Bob Mueller can do?
Well, I mean, it's broad and it's very independent. In his appointment of former FBI Director Mueller, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein says that he will be able to investigate any possible contacts or links with the Russian government and the Trump campaign. And any matters that arose during the investigation or may arise out of the investigation. That is a broad charge to Mr. Mueller, and he has complete independence, practically speaking.
And so that seems to be the basket in which people would put this question of cover-up that Senator Feinstein was talking about, that idea that anything arising from the investigation. Is that the way you read it?
Absolutely. Any of those matters. I mean, it's confined to these allegations. I mean, he can't go off on some tangent and investigate, you know, all other matters. But it's broad and it's wide-ranging. And I think I want to make this point, too. It's going to be absolutely confidential. And I think that's why we're going to see such a difference in the investigations that are going on Capitol Hill. And
confidential meaning not as leaky as we've been maybe having in some of the discussions before because of Mueller's reputation.
Sure, and I mean this is he's a former prosecutor. I mean there'd be former prosecutors.
Jeff, give me a sense of Comey's allies and what this talk about him, the president calling him a nut job and so forth, how that has affected the kind of response in the building, and just a lot of these leaks are coming probably from those people.
Well, he has a lot of allies, and that's why they were stunned by this move and the way that it happened so publicly. He wasn't informed privately. This happened on live TV, essentially, and there were a lot of people in the FBI, both current and former FBI employees who were offended by that, because one thing about James Comey they know, you might quibble with some of his decisions, but you don't attack his character. And that's what the White House was doing consistently and frankly still doing that. And so there are a lot of people who are offended by that, and that's where you see some of these leaks coming out. And though there is a special counsel now, I think these leaks are going to continue because they're coming from people who feel that it is their patriotic duty to counter the White House denials. So I suspect even though Bob Mueller will seal up the investigation, there are people outside of government who are briefed or have been briefed on the details of this investigation already, and they will push back against these White House denials.
Jan, help me understand the threshold for obstruction of justice, which is what people are talking about here with respect to the president and this investigation.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to keep in mind that President Trump is not going to be tried in court for obstruction of justice. There will not be charges brought against President Trump because the Constitution, I mean, it's an open question whether a sitting president can be charged in court with obstruction of justice. Remember, Richard Nixon was an unindicted co-conspirator. This goes to a political question, and if former Director Mueller finds there is some evidence of obstruction, that goes into Congress. They can start impeachment proceedings against President Trump for potential obstruction of justice. That's what President Clinton and President Nixon were brought into impeachment proceedings for. But they have to show intent. And that's a very difficult thing to show. It's not that this looks bad, it was a stupid thing to say, it may have been offensive to FBI employees. There has to be that Trump intended to obstruct this investigation. That's difficult to show, and I think based on what we've seen so far, there's not that evidence, and that's what these kind of investigations you're going to see from the special counsel. They'll look at all that.
Right, they have to get in his head, essentially.
Right, which may be difficult.
Right.
But it's not easy to prove, and so that's what they're going to be looking at, the intent.
And Jeff, give me your sense of this, the meeting in the Oval Office with the Russian leaders. There was two things. There's the Comey conversation, and also, but there was this classified intelligence that was supposedly a part of that conversation. What have you heard about that?
Well, that is an image that will haunt this White House for quite some time. There are people in the intelligence community, both current and former law enforcement community, who saw that image and they were offended by it. Keep in mind, that was a meeting that Vladimir Putin called for. That's what he wanted. And in those images, you see the president laughing and joking with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, who is a central character in this investigation. And so for a lot of people, especially former intelligence officials, that was a real slap in the face. And now you hear more of these revelations coming out of this meeting, and that's why you hear these leaks as well, because people want to expose what they believe is the truth.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff and Jan, and we'll be back in a moment.